بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طلبة المرحلة الثانية، أبدأ بالشرح التوضيحي للمحاضرة السادسة من محاضرات الدهون. The topics of this lecture is triglycerides. What are triglycerides? Triglycerides are the most common types of fats in the body. They come from foods, especially butter and oils. Triglycerides also come from extra calories. These are the calories that you eat but the body does not need right away. The body changes these extra calories into triglycerides and stores them in fat cells. When the body needs energy, it releases the triglycerides. Very low density lipoprotein particles carry the triglycerides to the tissue. إذن أكثر fat in the body موجود بالجسم هو الترايغليسيرايدز. السورس ماله from food ومن الاكسترا كالوريز اللي تجي من الدايت. هذه الاكسترا كالوريز اللي ما يحتاجها الجسم تخزن او تحول الى ترايغليسيرايد وتخزن في الفات سيل، ومن يحتاج البودي الانرجي يعمل ريليز الى هذه الترايغليسيرايدز. Biosynthesis of triacylglycerols or triglycerides. Three main pathways for triacylglycerol biosynthesis are known. First, the glycerol 3-phosphate pathway. Second, dihydroxyacetone-phosphate pathway, which is predominant in the liver and adipose tissue. Third, a monoacylglycerol pathway in the intestine. إذن 3 pathway للbiosynthesis of triglyceride. The first pathway with second pathway predominates in liver and adipose tissue, and the third pathway is occur in the intestine. The first pathway, the glycerol 3-phosphate or Kennedy pathway. The most important pathway for triacylglycerol biosynthesis is the glycerol 3-phosphate or Kennedy pathway, first described by Professor Eugene Kennedy and colleagues in 1950, by means of which more than 90% of liver triacylglycerol are produced. إذن هذا الباثواي 90% من الترايغليسرايد produced in the liver by this pathway. In this pathway, the main source of the glycerol believed to be glycerol 3-phosphate, which is produced by the catabolism of glucose, that's to say in glycolysis, or to lesser extent by the action of enzyme glycerol kinase on the free glycerol. إذن السورسز إما من الجليسرول 3-phosphate أو من action of the enzyme glycerol kinase on free glycerol. However, there is increasing evidence that a significant proportion of the glycerol is produced by the process known as glyceroneogenesis via pyruvate. Indeed, this may be the main source in adipose tissue. إذن الsource of glycerol either من الجليسرول 3-phosphate or from the action of the glycerol kinase on the free glycerol أو من الglyceroneogenesis. And these are the source of glycerol. Subsequent reaction occur primarily in the endoplasmic reticulum. First, the precursor اللي هو عندنا الجليسرول 3-phosphate is esterified by a fatty acid coenzyme I ester in a reaction catalyzed by a glycerol 3-phosphate acyltransferase at position 1 to form lysophosphatidic acid, and this is in turn acylated by an acylglycerophosphate acyltransferase enzyme in position 2 to form a key intermediate in the biosynthesis of all glycerolipids, which is phosphatidic acid. The phosphate group is removed by an enzyme or family of enzymes like phosphatidic acid phosphohydrolase or phosphatidate phosphatase or lipid phosphate phosphatase. Even these are enzymes that lead to removal of the phosphate group. The final step in this pathway, the resultant 1,2-diacylglycerol is acylated by diacylglycerol acyltransferase enzyme, which can catalyze a wide range of fatty acyl coesters to form the triacylglycerol. إذا الخطوة الأخيرة هي اللي ينتج عندنا هو ال 1,2-diacylglycerol is acylated، أيضا ينضاف له another fatty acid in the presence of enzyme diacylglycerol acyltransferase enzyme and lead to formation of a triglyceride. And this picture shows the first pathway in the synthesis of triglycerides. As we said, the glycerol 3 phosphate will be converted to lysophosphatidic acid, then to phosphatidic acid, and the phosphatidic acid then convert by phosphorylase enzyme إلى diacylglycerol، يعني removal of the phosphate group and converted to diacylglycerol. Then diacylglycerol will further be acylated and another fatty acid will be added and convert to triglyceride. Now the second pathway for the synthesis of triglyceride is dihydroxyacetone-phosphate pathway. This is the second pathway for triglyceride biosynthesis. Dihydroxyacetone-phosphate in peroxisome or endoplasmic reticulum can be acylated by specific acyltransferase to form 1-acyl dihydroxyacetone-phosphate. إذا أول مرة acylated يعني نضيف الأسايل جروب أو الفاتي acid to the dihydroxyacetone-phosphate, which is reduced by dihydroxyacetone-phosphate oxido-reductase. إذا هذا الأول structure اللي راح يتكون عندنا راح يصير بينه reduction أو reduced by dihydroxyacetone-phosphate oxido-reductase enzyme، يصير بينه reduction إلى to form lysophosphatidic acid، وبعدين من يتكون lysophosphatidic acid يدخل بنفس المراحل اللي دخل بيها lysophosphatidic acid in the first pathway إلى أن ينتهي بالformation of a triglyceride. So dihydroxyacetone-phosphate يعطينا acylated to 1-acyl dihydroxyacetone-phosphate. Then reduction will occur and formation of lysophosphatidic acid, which is lead to يعني enter نفس pathway، راح يدخل نفس pathway lysophosphatidic acid يعطي phosphatidic acid and 1,2-diacylglycerol and then formation of a triglyceride. The third pathway, which is a monoacylglycerol pathway in the enterocyte of intestine. Then this pathway occur in the intestine after meal. Up to 75% of triacylglycerol are formed via monoacylglycerol pathway. إذا 75% من الترايغليسيرايد اللي تتكون بالانتستين من خلال المونوacylglycerol pathway. 2 monoacylglycerol and free fatty acid released from dietary triglyceride by the action of pancreatic lipase within the intestine are taken up by the enterocyte. احنا قلنا من يصير hydrolysis للترايغليسيرايد راح يتحلل إلى أو يصير بينه hydrolyzed إلى ال 2 monoglycerol أو 2 monoacylglycerol مع الفري فاتي أسيد ويصير بها absorption إلى الانتستينال سيل. وقلنا داخل الانتستينال سيل راح يصير ريسينثيسيس للترايغليسيرايد. فإذا هو هذا الباثوي هو الريسينثيسيس of triglycerides from monoacylglycerol مع الفري فاتي أسيد. إذا هذا ينطينا بالنهاية الترايغليسيرايد. There, the monoacylglycerol are first acylated by an acyl coenzyme A, which is monoacylglycerol acyltransferase enzyme, this enzyme has isoforms, and the most active isoform of this enzyme is monoacylglycerol acyltransferase 2, with formation of 1,2-diacylglycerol mainly as the first intermediate in the process. إذا الخطوة الأولى هي راح نضيف الأسايل جروب بالبوزيشن 1. احنا قلنا البوزيشن 2 هو مونو أسايل جليسيرول. المونو أسايل جليسيرول بينه الفاتي أسيد بالبوزيشن 2، فاحنا من نيجي نضيف الأسايل جروب أو الفاتي أسيد شين راح نضيفه بالبوزيشن 1. although sometimes الإضافة تكون بالبوزيشن 3 ويتكون عندنا 2,3-diacyl-glycerol اللي هي يكون لنا 10%، يعني 90% الإضافة تكون بالبوزيشن 1 الإضافة الأولى، و10% تكون الإضافة الأولى بالبوزيشن 3. This produced also by can be produced also, and أيضا عندنا another enzyme can help in this reaction, which is diacylglycerol acyltransferase 1, also can acylate monoacylglycerol. Finally, the acyl coenzyme A, diacylglycerol acyltransferase, reacts with the 1,2-diacylglycerol only to form triglycerides. Then another acyl group will be added to the 1,2-diacylglycerol and form triglycerides. إذا فقط مع ال1,2 اللي إذا الستركتشر اللي يتكون أو البرودكت اللي يتكون هو 2,3-diacyl ما يشتغل عليها الإنزيم diacylglycerol acyltransferase 1. إذا this react with the 1,2-diacylglycerol only to form a triacylglycerol. So this picture show this pathway اللي هو المونوغليسيرول pathway of triglyceride synthesis. قلنا التو مونو اسايل جليسيرول اللي هو قلنا عبارة عن الجليسيرول مع الفاتي اسيد بالبوزيشن 2. يصير بينه اسيليشن، راح ينضاف له الفاتي اسيد او الاسايل جروب بالبوزيشن 1 ويكون لنا 1,2-diacyl glycerol. ممكن يصير الإضافة بالبوزيشن 3 ويكون عندنا 2,3-diacyl glycerols، لكن فقط ال 1,2-diacyl glycerol هو اللي راح يتحول إلى الترايجليسيرايدز in the presence of enzyme اللي هو diacylglycerol acyltransferase. So what cause high triglycerides? Factors that can raise triglyceride level include: first, regularly eating more calories that you burn off, especially if you eat a lot of sugar. Second, being overweight or having obesity. Third, cigarette smoking. Fourth, excessive alcohol use. Fifth, certain medicine. And sixth, some genetic disorders, thyroid disease, poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, and liver or kidney disease. Normal less than 150 mg per deciliter, normal level of triglyceride should be less than 150 mg per deciliter. Borderline higher than 150 to 199 mg per deciliter. إذا بين 150 إلى 199 ملغ هذه تكون borderline. إذا كانت أعلى من 200 إلى 499 ملغ per deciliter هذه تكون تعتبر high. very high النسبة تكون كلش high إذا كانت أكثر من 500 ملغ per deciliter or above. إذا النورمال ليفل أقل من 150. البوردر لاين بين 150 إلى 199 نعتبرها هاي إذا كانت بين 200 إلى 499 ملغ per deciliter، و very high إذا كانت أكثر من 500 ملغ per deciliter. Levels above of 150 mg per deciliter may raise your risk for heart disease. يعني إذا شخص عنده الترايجليسيرايد أعلى من 150 تزيد الريسك of heart disease. Triglyceride level of 150 mg per deciliter or higher is also a risk factor for metabolic syndrome. إذن أيضا heart problem و other metabolic syndrome. Lipid metabolism in adipose tissue. Adipose tissue function as an area for caloric storage when there is an excessive intake of calories. This will be transformed to fatty acid and to triglyceride and stored in the adipose tissue. إذن الكالوري تنخزن في الادipose tissue كترايجليسيرايد وفاتي acid. While when there is a stress or other energy defects, fatty acids will be released from the adipose tissue. إذا نحتاج هذا الفاتي acid في حالة الستريس أو energy defects نحتاجه كإنرجي راح يصير عندنا ريليز لهذا الفاتي acid من الادipose tissue. Glucose by itself can provide all atoms needed for triglyceride synthesis. إذا كان كل الجلوكوز ممكن أن يتحول أو كان ممكن يجهز لي كل الأتومز اللي نحتاجها في synthesis of triglycerides. Adipocytes اللي هي adipose tissue cell make up approximately 1/2 of the cell in adipose tissue. إذا الأديبوسايت هي تكون تقريبا نص الخلايا اللي موجودة في الأديبوس tissue. And the remainder being blood and endothelial cells, adipose precursor cell of varying degrees of differentiation, and fibroblasts. In humans, small clusters of adipocytes are present that increase in size during gestation. At the adipose tissue beds, fatty acids are liberated from triglyceride rich lipoprotein through the action of lipoprotein lipase and release fatty acids are bound by albumin and are the donor of lipid for fatty acid uptake. While obesity may seem on the surface to simply be excess consumption of food compared to energy expenditure, it is a complex metabolic disorder centered on adipose lipid metabolism and cellular signaling system linked to it. إذن الأوبستي هي ما فقط تبين بالظاهر كأن زيادة في consumption of food and وقلة بالإنرجي يعني زيادة الفود مقارنة مع الإنرجي expenditure، لكن هي عبارة عن metabolic disorder. Obesity is a complex metabolic disorder centered on the adipose lipid metabolism and cellular signaling system. In summary, triglycerides are the major energy storing lipids. Triglycerides and some phosphoglycerols are synthesized by progressive acylation of glycerol 3-phosphate. احنا قلنا المين pathway for triglyceride synthesis هو من الجليسرول 3-phosphate. Thank you very much.